Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right in today with a really intriguing one, maybe a bit surprising actually. It's all about digging into those hidden histories. Have you ever had that feeling that maybe there's more to our human story than what we learn in school? If that sounds like you, well, you're in the right place, because today we're asking this question. What if a really crucial part of our past, a civilization with some profound wisdom, was sort of deliberately wiped from our collective memory? We're going beyond Atlantis, beyond ancient Egypt even. We're talking about something potentially older, something that whispers, maybe, from the deep currents of consciousness. Today, we're diving into the mystery of Lemuria, or sometimes called Mu. This idea of a lost civilization, often, dismissed by mainstream history. But for some people, maybe for you listening, there's this pull, this strange connection perhaps to the ocean, or dreams of ancient lands, or just the sense that some sacred knowledge got hidden away. For those people, Lemuria feels like more than a myth. These sources we're looking at suggest it might be a call to remember something important.
So to really unpack this, we've gathered a whole range of sources, oral histories, esoteric traditions, mystic visions. The goal here is to pull out the key insights about this forgotten land. What was its essence? Why might it have been suppressed? And maybe most importantly, what's its relevance for us now?
Exactly. And what's really striking about Lemuria is just how varied these sources are. It's not one single story. We're looking at a whole tapestry of beliefs and visions and traditions that give us a pretty fascinating window into human potential. And maybe these hidden layers of history, it promises to be quite a journey into some different perspectives.
Okay, let's start there then. Defining Lemuria. Our sources, they talk about Mu or Lemuria, and they say it's a much more than just like a physical place, a continent in the Pacific from way back before Babylon or Egypt. They frame it as a state of consciousness. What does that actually mean in this context?
Yeah, that's the crucial bit, isn't it? At its heart, Lemuria is described as a way of being, a profound harmony with the earth. The sources suggest people communicated, telepathically.
Telepathically, wow.
Yeah, and were guided by this sort of unified spiritual awareness, deeply connected apparently to the stars as well. It was a civilization where, the very fabric of life was tuned into nature and cosmic rhythms.
And that makes it a really interesting comparison point, especially when you think about Atlantis, right? Atlantis usually gets linked with, advanced tech, maybe power struggles.
Exactly.
But Lemuria, these sources say, embodied the feminine principle. Can you unpack that a bit more for us?
Sure. So in this context, the feminine principle isn't about gender in the way we usually think about it. It's more about qualities like intuitive wisdom, emotional depth, that nurturing connection, universal love.
Ah, okay.
The idea here is that Lemuria provides a kind of blueprint for a society where those qualities were absolutely central, not just valued, but foundational. A stark contrast to the power-driven stories we often hear.
So how did that translate into their society?
Well, the descriptions suggest a really unique structure. No kings, no empires, no big central authority. Instead, you had these small, sacred communities. Every single person was seen as like a divine spark of the source energy. Conflict was apparently rare. Healing was vibrational, using sound, energy. And the land itself was said to pulse with this crystalline energy. It's a model for a very different kind of world.
So while mainstream science might, debate if it even existed physically,
Right.
our sources point to these echoes all over the globe.
Yeah.
Oral histories in Polynesia, Hawaii, they call it Mu in their old chants. India has stories of Kumari Kandam. Even South America has legends of a lost land swallowed by the ocean.
And that's the fascinating part, isn't it? Why do these similar threads appear in cultures so far apart? Then you add in the accounts from mystics and esoteric writers, people like Helena Blavatsky, who founded Theosophy,
Right.
or Rudolf Steiner, the Austrian philosopher, and Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. They all talk about Lemuria, not just as myth, but as a real phase in Earth's spiritual development.
A real phase. How so?
They describe a time when human souls were, more etheric, less dense than we are now, more directly plugged into the divine, you could say, suggesting a different point in our spiritual evolution.
Okay, so if we try to tie all these threads together, the myths, the mystic accounts, what's the bigger picture they're painting? What's the takeaway for us?
I think the core insight, the real nugget here, is this idea that Lemuria represents a kind of buried memory, a memory of a way of being. It's like a blueprint for a more conscious, loving, unified way for humans to exist. It's maybe less about finding a sunken continent and more about rediscovering a lost state of awareness that might still be, imprinted within us collectively.
Okay, that leads us into their legacy. Some sources get really specific, suggesting Lemurians had a different kind of DNA, more crystalline, enabling higher consciousness. That sounds pretty out there.
It does sound radical, yeah. But the idea isn't just biological in the way we think of DNA now. It's energetic, too. Their bodies were described as vessels of light. The deeper concept here is that humans might have once had this capacity for a direct, unfiltered line to divine consciousness.
A direct line, wow.
Yeah, and that capacity, these sources hint, might still be dormant within us. They say Lemurians were truly multidimensional beings, not just stuck on the physical plane, meaning they could access other realms, get guidance from, well, what they called celestial intelligences, even consciously travel astrally. Their connection to the source or the divine was just natural, constant. No need for dogma or hierarchies to mediate it.
And there's that specific teaching about DNA having 12 active strands versus the 2 physical ones science talks about. What did those extra strands supposedly do?
Well, according to these esoteric teachings, those extra strands weren't physical structures in the same way. They operated on a quantum energetic level. They governed things like intuition, telepathy, healing abilities, even the perception of time itself. It's like their biology was fundamentally wired for spiritual connection and expanded awareness.
Which implies a much broader range of human potential than we generally acknowledge today.
First,
And here's where it gets really personal for you listening. The belief, according to these traditions, is that traces of this Lemurian DNA, this potential, are still within us.
exactly. They suggest that people who are highly empathic, really feel things deeply, or sense energy shifts, or feel this powerful pull towards spiritual growth. They might actually be carrying an imprint of this Lemurian code, like a soul memory waking up.
In some places on Earth, they're even seen as gateways, right?
Yeah,
Like Mount Shasta in California.
that's a key one, yeah. Mount Shasta is often mentioned. There's talk of Telos, a city existing in a higher dimension, basically, a different vibrational frequency, not accessible to our normal senses, supposedly inhabited by descendants of Lemurians.
And people go there and report strange experiences.
Mystics and sensitive individuals often report powerful visions there, a feeling of deep connection, even a sense of coming home. It reinforces the idea that Lemuria isn't just history, it might be tied to the very architecture of our souls.
Okay, this begs a huge question then. If this was such a profound civilization, why is it basically invisible in our standard history books? Why the dismissal?
Well, the esoteric historians we looked at have a clear answer. It's about the power of that knowledge. Think about it. Teachings of unity consciousness, our own inner divinity, the sacredness of all life.
Yeah, that doesn't exactly support systems built on hierarchy.
Precisely. It would fundamentally challenge systems based on fear, division, control, obedience. So the theory goes, it was deliberately suppressed.
And what about the disappearance? The sinking?
The narrative often involves massive Earth changes, tectonic shifts, maybe changes in solar cycles. Some even mention a sort of karmic collapse. Lemuria sank. But survivors, the story goes, carried fragments of their wisdom to other parts of the world.
Like where?
Places like ancient Egypt, India, the Andes, Easter Island. And this, proponents say, is why we see similar sacred symbols or architectural echoes like pyramids or certain stonework in these cultures that supposedly had no contact. It's the Lemurian legacy spreading out.
Okay, so survivors spread the knowledge, but then what happened?
Well, as humanity moved into what some traditions call darker ages or cycles of lower consciousness, new systems of control emerged. Think colonial empires, state-controlled religions, maybe even secret societies.
And these...
Our sources claim they actively worked to control information. Ancient wisdom that empowered the individual was rebranded as heresy, restricted, distorted, or just destroyed. Anything that threatened centralized power had to be managed or eliminated.
And is this connected today?
The argument is that this pattern continues, maybe more subtly. Modern education systems, for instance, often prioritize materialist, linear thinking. They might exclude or marginalize narratives that talk about consciousness, energy, or our interconnection to the divine, teaching us instead to look for answers and authority outside ourselves.
So the real threat of Lemuria, according to this view, isn't about starting a revolution or anything like that.
No, not at all. It's dangerous to control systems because it reminds people they don't need to be ruled in the same way. It's an invitation to reclaim personal sovereignty through inner remembrance, not outer conflict.
Makes sense. If you want to keep people from reclaiming a powerful spiritual heritage, the best way is to convince them it never existed in the first place.
Exactly. Make it seem like just a fanciful myth.
But the claim is that despite this suppression, the legacy isn't truly gone. It's embedded in things like sacred symbols, like living codes waiting to be activated.
Yes, that's a key part of the narrative. These aren't just static symbols. They're seen as carriers of frequency, of consciousness. They're part of the language of the ancients, meant to awaken something within us when the time is right.
And this connects to sacred geometry.
Absolutely. Patterns like the spiral, the flower of life, the lotus flower, you find these worldwide, right?
Oh.
In ancient temples, in manuscripts, carved into megalithic sites. The idea is they're more than just decoration. They're energetic blueprints that resonate with universal principles and can help align our own consciousness.
Can you give examples? What do specific symbols represent?
Sure. The spiral, for instance, is often seen as representing the soul's journey, evolution, growth, the path of ascension. Then you have the tree of life, which appears in traditions like Kabbalah and Hermeticism. It's like a map of divine energy flowing into creation, a guide for spiritual awakening.
Okay. And what about physical objects? Crystals are mentioned a lot.
Yes, Lemurian seed crystals, particularly large quartz formations found in places like Mount Shasta or the Himalayas, are believed to be special. They're thought to literally store the memories, the frequencies, the consciousness of Lemuria.
So people meditate with them to connect.
That's the idea, that working with these crystals or meditating on the sacred symbols isn't just intellectual, it's about tapping into an energetic network, making a direct connection with that Lemurian state of consciousness. They act almost like portals.
Okay, so it's about resonance, which brings us back to the personal level for you, the listener. Many people apparently feel this deep, almost magnetic pull towards Lemuria. It's not just curiosity, it feels like remembering something.
A soul remembrance, yeah. That's how it's often described. If you find yourself fascinated by ancient mysteries or drawn to spiritual practices focused on energy, consciousness, healing, the idea is you might be carrying a Lemurian thread within your soul's lineage.
Are there specific signs or feelings associated with this?
The sources list quite a few common ones, things like feeling intense empathy, like really feeling the pain or joy of others, of animals, of the planet itself.
Right.
A very strong connection to the ocean or water, finding peace there, feeling drawn to it. A fascination with crystals, with sacred geometry, with the big cosmic questions.
What else?
Maybe having vivid dreams or flashes of insight visions, almost of ancient lands, sometimes submerged underwater. Or this profound, deep sense of homesickness for a place you've never actually been to.
Yeah.
Longing for somewhere else.
I can see how those could resonate with people.
And sometimes it connects to feeling a link to certain star systems too, like Sirius or the Pleiades, or even to ideas about inner Earth realms. This concept of being a starseed often comes up.
A starseed, meaning?
Someone whose soul, in this view, has origins beyond Earth, often with a sense of having a mission here, usually related to helping humanity awaken, remembering this lost wisdom, guiding the planet through big changes.
So if you feel these things, if you have this deep urge maybe to heal, to work with energy, to promote peace and unity.
Yes, the interpretation within these sources is that this could be your soul prompting you, calling you to remember the wisdom and consciousness associated with Lemuria. Recognizing these signs, they say, is often the first step towards activating that dormant potential within you. It's part of this larger awakening happening now.
Which leads us to the idea of a return. Is Lemurian consciousness actually coming back now?
That's exactly what many of these sources propose. They describe a powerful shift happening on Earth, a kind of spiritual renaissance, and it's characterized by the very qualities associated with Lemuria.
Such as
The rise of feminine energy, not just in women, but as a principle of intuition, collaboration, nurturing, a focus on collective healing, and this idea of humanity transitioning to higher dimensions, often called 5D or ascension.
Right, 5D. What does that practically mean in this framework? So like moving to a different place.
Not necessarily a physical place, no. It's more about a shift in consciousness, a change in our vibrational frequency, moving beyond the limitations of the purely physical 3D reality we're used to, seeing interconnectedness, living more from the heart, that kind of thing.
And this ties into ancient prophecies.
Yeah, some sources connect it to prophecies of a solar flash, a big burst of energy from sun that could act as a catalyst for mass awakening. And also to cyclical views of time, like the Yugas and Vedic tradition, suggesting we're naturally moving into an age of higher consciousness. It all points to humanity being on the verge of reclaiming this forgotten unity consciousness that Lemuria supposedly embodied.
So as the old ways of thinking, the old control systems, maybe start to crumble.
Exactly. And as more and more people turn inwards, embracing things like meditation, energy work, exploring sacred geometry, the idea is that the collective vibration, the Lemurian frequency, gets stronger.
Making it harder for the old control paradigms to hold sway.
That's the theory. It becomes harder to maintain control based on fear and division when consciousness itself is shifting towards unity and love.
So the promise here is a path beyond just fighting the old, but actually embodying something new.
Precisely. A path beyond duality, beyond fear and separation. It's an invitation for all of us to wake up to our own inherent divine nature and start co-creating a world based on love, balance, cosmic harmony. In this sense, Lemuria isn't lost at all. It's rising. Rising within each of us. It's a living potential.
Wow. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it really feels like the core message is about reclaiming something vital. The story of Lemuria, whether you take it literally or metaphorically, seems to be this profound invitation, doesn't it? A call to wake up parts of ourselves that have been buried, maybe for a very long time.
Absolutely. Despite any attempts, conscious or unconscious, to erase this kind of knowledge, its spirit seems incredibly resilient. It whispers through these ancient symbols, through crystals, and, maybe most powerfully, through our own soul's intuition and deepest feelings.
It leaves you with some pretty big thoughts to ponder.
It really does. Like, what if remembering Lemuria, or at least the consciousness it represents, is actually a missing key for you personally, a key to unlocking your true spiritual purpose? And maybe even bigger picture. What if this seemingly lost civilization holds a kind of blueprint for humanity's next big evolutionary step?
Those are powerful questions. And if any of this resonates with you, if you feel that pull or that sense of remembrance, the message seems to be, you're definitely not alone. There's a feeling that many people are waking up to this right now.
Yes, it feels like a collective stirring.
And by embracing that feeling, that remembrance, maybe we can all play a part in this shift, helping to restore that sense of unity, love, and, dare I say, spiritual mastery to our world. So let the story of Lemuria be an inspiration, an invitation to seek, to awaken within yourself, and to reclaim the wisdom that perhaps belongs to all of us. It seems the journey isn't just about finding a lost continent out there, but about remembering a lost part of ourselves right here, right now, and using that to help shape a very different future.